underway by...
From GC 90.7's Studio A on the campus of Gulf Coast State College, Rapline with Emily Blaze.
Being diagnosed with a chronic disease can be scary, and a diagnosis can bring up a lot of emotions as well. Today on Rapline, we'll speak with a certified diabetes educator who will dispel some myths about the disease and touch on the emotional side, as well as diabetes etiquette for those who don't have diabetes. Today, my guest is Marcia Pell. She is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified diabetes educator. Marcia, thanks for coming back to Rapline.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first off, let's talk a little bit about what is diabetes?
Well, it's a chronic disease. It has a genetic component. There's two types. The one that most people have is called type 2 diabetes. And the main problems with type 2 diabetes is you don't make enough insulin, and also your body's cells resist the insulin. And the insulin's job is like a key to open up all the cells in your body to let the glucose go in. Glucose is another word for blood sugar. And the blood sugar needs to get into the cells where it provides energy for the body. So with type 2 diabetes, you don't make enough insulin, and I kind of like to think of your cells have faulty locks. And so the locks don't really work, and so the insulin can't hook up to the cell to open it up. So that's called insulin resistance. So in the early phases, you generally have faulty locks, and then you make a lot of extra insulin because your blood sugars are still too high, and then over time you don't make as much insulin. So that's the type that almost everybody has. There's another type called type 1 diabetes, and in that type, something destroys the beta cells that make insulin, and you make no insulin. So it's not a faulty lock problem, it's that you don't make insulin. And so therefore the treatment for that is to inject insulin.
And so the most common type that you deal with is the type 2?
Mm-hmm, right. I think like 95% of people have type 2 diabetes.
And now what might some of their symptoms be prior to a diagnosis that they later can say, oh, that's why I was feeling this way or that way? What are some of the symptoms that they have?
Probably the most common ones are fatigue, just not having any energy, being really thirsty, and peeing a lot. But those are often not recognized, especially living in Florida. I mean, we're hot, we drink a lot, we sweat a lot, we pee a lot, and so, and then, and the other thing about type 2 diabetes, it comes on slowly. It's not real sudden, so people don't really realize usually how bad they feel until they get diagnosed and get their blood sugars in target, and then they feel so much better. And so I hear that a lot, where they didn't realize how tired they were. So many people have diabetes and don't know it.
And Marcia, this is a chronic disease?
Yeah, there's no cure for it.
Okay, so talk to us about what it means to have a chronic disease. What does that word actually mean?
Well, it just means that it doesn't go away. It's not, acute means something, like you might have an infection, that would be acute, and the infection heals and you don't have it anymore. But there's no cure for diabetes. It doesn't go away, so it's just really, really tough. With diabetes, especially, it is really, really tough to have diabetes. There's things that you have to do every day to have your blood sugars in target. And it's like a job that you didn't ask for, you don't want it, you don't get a vacation, and you don't get paid to do it. So it's really tough. People with diabetes in general need to, eat in a diabetes-friendly way, which is generally a healthy diet. Exercising really improves their blood sugar. It helps those cells with the faulty locks open up and let the insulin go in. That's one of the main things it does. They generally check their blood sugar to see what is my number right now, just to get information. That's the main, and then do different things based on what your blood sugar is. It generally means taking medication for it, and then there's no break from it. So it's really tough.
So in your experience dealing with helping people that have just been diagnosed with diabetes, what are some of the common reactions that the person has when they're just newly diagnosed with diabetes?
Well, one of the most common one is people often feel very guilty. They oftentimes feel like it's their fault that they have diabetes. They feel like if they ate better, if they exercised, if they weren't overweight, all these things, they did it to themselves. That is definitely not true. There are a lot of heavy people that are inactive who don't have diabetes. Diabetes is complex, and there is a genetic component. And absolutely, your lifestyle can, has an impact on it. But I think that one of the most common things is feeling like it's their fault. And that just leads to some other problems. Another common thing is just being scared to death. I think some people are afraid to eat. One of my saddest things personally that I deal with is people that are so afraid to eat. And so they're kind of starving because their blood sugars are still high and they think it's all about the food, and so they try not to eat, and then they're so overwhelmed and their blood sugars are still not in target, so they think they need to eat less, and that just breaks my heart. And then another common thing, and I think it's a kind of a protective mechanism to go into denial, but that can be a problem if you don't deal with it. A lot of things about diabetes it's easy to ignore because, you might just feel tired and pee a lot, but, it's just easy to not pay attention to it. But that can lead to uncontrolled blood sugars that are out of target, which can do a lot of damage over time. So those are, some of the main things that I see. People that don't do anything, people that are afraid to eat, and that people that think it's their fault. And then, of course, there's some who kind of saw it coming because a lot of people in their family have it, and they're like, okay, this is my wake-up call. I've had people tell me getting diabetes was the best thing that ever happened to them. And when I first time I heard it, I was like, what? What do you mean? And they're like, okay, this is my wake-up call. Now I'm going to start eating healthy, and I'm going to try to live a better lifestyle. So those are, those would, I would say, be the top things that people, how they respond to it.
So, Marcia, what could you tell someone who is feeling that guilt about being diagnosed, feeling like it's their fault that they have this disease? How can you help them with those feelings?
Well, I like to let them know that it is a genetic problem, and it's way more complicated than just you caused it to yourself. I mean, even when people don't know anybody in the family with diabetes, we know it's genetic. So it could be that somebody wasn't diagnosed or somebody didn't talk about it, but we know it's genetic. And really feeling guilty is not useful. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you feel guilty, then you often set up rigid rules. Like, this is my fault, so now I have to eat in a real rigid way and just rigid. And then it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to have all your blood sugars in target. It's impossible for anybody. And you don't have to be perfect. And so the people that feel guilty set up rigid rules. Then they can't, it doesn't work. They can't stick with the rigid rules. Their blood sugars aren't perfect. So then that can lead to depression. And so it's just not helpful at all. So, I try to help people to focus more on the behaviors that we do know that help, okay? Because when you have diabetes, you have a really good chance with good care and attention to live a long and healthy life with it. It's not so many people think it's just devastating and for sure they're going to lose body parts, but that is not the case. But you have to have good care and pay attention to it. So I like to try to help people to figure out, ways that they can be successful in doing, pay attention and do good care and know you don't have to be perfect and just keep working at it.
Now, you mentioned that there's oftentimes a genetic factor. Mm-hmm. So does that mean if my mom or dad had diabetes that I'm going to get it? You have a chance of getting it. I mean, it is definitely genetic. I know people that have it on both sides of the family. They're more likely to get it. So some things you can't help, and some things you can help. And so some of the things that you can help would be to try to be physically active every day, try to eat healthy, try to limit how often you have the extra sugars, the extra fats. If you're drinking sweet tea and regular soft drinks, switch to something that doesn't have sugar in it. Just try to live a healthy lifestyle and be checked. Have your doctor check your glucose every 6 months or so. Or your another lab that's often checked is called the hemoglobin A1C, or A1C for short, to make sure, where are you as far as your blood sugars go. And regardless of where they are, try to, live a healthy lifestyle. That's good for everybody. You are listening and watching Rapline here on GC 90.7 and GC907.org. And my guest today is registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator, Marcia Pell. You can get more information on her website as well at marciapell.com. So you touched on some behaviors. I say you like to focus on behaviors that people can do to help themselves. So what are some behaviors that someone can do to live healthier with diabetes?
Well, one of the main things is you have to pay attention to it, So I think it's very helpful when people monitor their blood sugar. And what that means is you have a glucose meter and some test strips, and you prick your finger or prick something to get a little drop of blood to see what your blood sugar is. And that can be really helpful, especially if you use the numbers for something. So one of the good ways to do it is to what we call test in pairs. So if you want to know, how is my body handling my dinner, you could check your blood sugar before dinner and then check it 2 hours after dinner and see how did my blood sugar change. Mm-hmm. Or you could check it before you exercise or after you exercise. How did that affect my blood sugar? And it's usually very helpful for people to kind of see and learn what their behavior is doing to their blood sugar. Mm-hmm. I encourage people to test all kinds of things. Have a meal with sweet tea or go to an all-you-can-eat restaurant. Test before and after that. See the impact. Because I think seeing those numbers can be very helpful, but you really have to realize these are just numbers. A lot of people, I heard about a study, 83% of people feel bad about themselves when they see their blood sugars out of target. And that is awful. 83% feel bad. And you just want to try to be positive about it. So I encourage people to remember, this is just a number, it's information, and try to use the information to make better choices. Another thing is to eat healthy and eat sort of on a regular basis. 3 meals a day works real well. I work with people to come up with a plan that's going to work for them, and it's very much individualized. So there's no strict diet. There's no certain way you have to eat. Many people have heard you have to eat 6 times a day, mm-hmm. or just a lot of rules. Usually they're not the case. They're just hearing from people who might not have all the expertise that they need to individualize it to individual people.
And one thing we often hear is, you can't ever eat carbs, you can't ever have bread or potatoes or anything like that.
I hear that every week. People think that they're doing. They sometimes people tell me, quite often they say, "I already know what to do," and I'm like, "Well, what is that?" Well, yeah, don't eat bread, don't eat pasta, don't eat rice. What's the other white thing? Potatoes.
Potatoes.
I was like, those are the 4 carbs. You can't eat them, but that's not true at all. It's more about trying to be consistent with carbohydrate and choosing healthy foods. Because again, this is a chronic disease. It's not going away. You need to pay attention to your diabetes from now on. So I really, encourage people to eat a wide variety of healthy foods. And also realize that you don't have to eat, exactly healthy all the time. I think we've talked before, I think eating healthy foods 80% of the time is often enough. And then 20% of the time have something that might have extra fat or sugar, but enjoy your food and not be so rigid about it. And you could even enjoy a white potato. But pay attention to, the whole meal, and not eating too much is a big issue. That's probably more important is the certain types of food.
The portion size.
Yeah, just not overeating. We overeat so much. And then choosing healthy foods. People with diabetes usually have cardiovascular disease, and they usually have high blood pressure. Those 3 things go hand in hand, and there's a diet component for all of them. So, just to get an idea of what healthy eating is, somebody could go to choosemyplate.gov, and that would be a good place to start. And then my website has some helpful tips on getting started also.
Now, Marcia, you mentioned that this can be a very stressful diagnosis, being diagnosed with diabetes. And, if your numbers are up, you might feel bad about yourself. So I'm wondering if stress, anxiety, is there any study that shows that has an effect on your blood sugar?
Yeah, stress can make your blood sugar actually go up also. Any kind of stress. So even getting sick can make your blood sugar go up, because when we're sick or when we're under any kind of stress, the liver will put glucose. The liver makes glucose and can put it into your bloodstream. And back in the day, if somebody was stressed, they usually had to fight something or run. So for those things, you need extra glucose. So the liver, under stress, puts glucose into your bloodstream. Now, if you don't have diabetes, you just make enough insulin, the cells accept it. But when you do have diabetes, you don't make enough insulin, and the cells are sometimes resistant to it, so the blood sugar can go up. The other thing that happens when people are stressed is, there's a lot of stressful things that happen in life. It's just hard to pay attention to diabetes on top of the other things that are stressful. So stress management, I should have put that up there with exercise and eating healthy, because that is another factor that really can help to control the blood sugars, is to just take time to relax. And whatever, it's different for different people, but meditate or, do something to try to, keep your stress level down and to manage it.
Good point. You are listening to Rapline here on GC 90.7 FM and GC907.org. And if you're watching us, well, you're watching GC TV. My guest today is a registered dietitian, Marcia Pell, and you can check out more info on her website, marciapell.com. Now, we talked a little bit about the myths and the emotional side of having diabetes. Let's talk about emotions that come from having that chronic disease.
Well, probably the main thing is just the stress of feeling that there's so much to do and you just can't do it. That's just feeling scared that you're not going to be able to do all that it takes. It would probably be one of the main ones. Of course, then you deal with the anger of getting it. It can just be a lot of emotions, but probably one of the main things is just feeling like you can't control it because you can't do the stress management and eating right, and you just can't do everything that you need to do. But what I like to tell people is you don't have to do it all every day, all at one time. Because usually when you don't feel like you can manage it, you either get depressed, and then if you're depressed, you're not
going to do anything.
You're not going to do anything, And so this is something that the person with diabetes mostly is the one that's responsible for doing this stuff for it. So it can be overwhelming. But so anyway, kind of lost my train of thought. That's one of the main things. So I really try to help people to just break it down and focus on just one thing to do and then get support.
And as you're talking about getting support, that leads me to wonder about, we were talking earlier, friends, family, coworkers, diabetes etiquette for those around the person that has diabetes. And I never even heard of that, diabetes etiquette for those who don't have diabetes.
When I first heard about this diabetes etiquette, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good, because it came from the Behavioral Diabetes Institute, and my favorite psychologist who specializes in diabetes, called Dr. William Polanski. And the diabetes etiquette is how to help people that don't have diabetes, who love somebody or care about somebody with diabetes, how to be the most helpful. And in my 18 years of working with diabetes, I was like, this just nails it, all the different ways that people can or cannot help. And so I love the 10 tips.
And some of those don'ts, don't tell me a horror story about someone in your life with diabetes that you've heard about. That's a don't.
Right. That's really common when people say, oh, my grandmother lost her legs. Because, today, you don't have your grandmother's diabetes. There is so much technology, so many better medications. With care and attention, chances are very good that you won't have devastating complications. So that's just not helpful to hear about, all the scary things that can happen. It's scary enough as it is.
Another don't on there, don't look so horrified when I check my blood sugars or give myself an injection.
Right. And I hear this from people. I'm mostly working with people with diabetes, and they often don't, that's a kind of a barrier for them if people are horrified and, think it's awful that they're taking insulin in a restaurant. But taking insulin and checking their blood sugar are two of the main things that they can do to live a healthy life with diabetes. So, just deal with it. They need to do that, and it's helpful if you're not horrified.
And another one on that list is don't offer thoughtless reassurances, like, hey, it could be worse.
Right. A lot of people say, well, at least it's not cancer, but that doesn't really help people to feel better, because this is a chronic disease that's hard to deal with, and it doesn't go away. Just like cancer. Cancer might go away. Diabetes doesn't go away, but both are very difficult to deal with.
So we talked about some of the don'ts. What are some of the do's that people can do to help someone that has diabetes?
Well, I would say the main thing is to ask them, how can I support you? What can I do to help? Because everybody's different, and what helps one person doesn't help another person. So don't assume that you know. One of my favorite and most common don'ts is, can I add one more?
Oh, sure.
Okay, is don't give unsolicited advice about what somebody should eat or not eat. This is really, really common where people, I know they try to be helpful. Should you really be eating that? That is, it's just not very nice to give unsolicited advice about people's personal choices about what they're making. But some people, the other thing is that I find all the time is that people think they know what the person with diabetes should be eating and not eating, and they usually don't know. And so, like, somebody could be eating a potato. Should you really be eating that potato? Yes, it's really okay. or they could really have something sweet. Yes, it's okay. So the person often with diabetes just feels nagged, so that's not helpful. So again, asking the person, how can I help you, would be one of the big ones, because usually there's a lot of little ways that somebody could support somebody with diabetes. One would be, could you do some healthy behaviors with them? You know, maybe if you go for a walk together, or go to the gym with them, or plan healthy meals together. You know, those would be some that would be the most common that I can think of. But just ask.
Just ask. That's a good point. Now, what about someone who's newly diagnosed, or maybe not even newly diagnosed? They've had it for a while, and it's just, you know, really draining, and they're getting real frustrated. Are there resources locally that, like a support group or anything like that locally?
There is a support group at the health department, Bay County Health Department. It's held in the late afternoons. I think it's on a Wednesday, one Wednesday a month. But the health department can give you more information on that. So I know that there's that one. And then there is I'm not sure if there's still a type 1 support group, but if somebody wants to know, I can get them. I just don't have, I wasn't ready for that question.
Yeah.
But they could just email me at support@marciapell.com, and I will get the information, the current information for them. But there are 2 support groups. And again, there's a lot of, I'm trying to make my website real helpful. So I have a blog, and I'm trying to put helpful things with some resources on there.
That's what I was going to ask you, is when they visit the website, what are some of the things that they're going to find there?
Yeah, well, I'm doing a blog, and I'm trying to do healthy things that people want to know about. The last one I just did was on traveling with diabetes. There could be things that you hadn't thought about with traveling with diabetes. So I put some tips on there. And then I have a resources listed, so just some website, good links for accurate, good information that also can be helpful. And then my services are on there also.
Okay. And what services do you offer?
Well, one of my new ones that I'm excited about is I'm teaching a class called New to Diabetes. It's designed for people just diagnosed who don't really know anything, because I want to help them with those emotions that they get and just help them get started. What are the main things I need to do? It's held at a restaurant, Victoria's Last Bite, when the restaurant's closed. So it's in the evening from 6 to 8 once a month. And so I'm excited about that class. It's new. I've done one so far. It was real successful. So I'm trying to get the word out about that if anybody knows somebody who needs help with getting started. And then I also have medical nutrition therapy. Those are individual one-on-one appointments where I can help people figure out what are the best steps for them. I help them with a meal plan if that's what they want, or if they're having trouble. Some people are on insulin pump. I'm a pump trainer for 2 companies, but I do a lot of not just diet. Even though I'm a diabetes dietitian, I can help people to learn other aspects to controlling their blood sugar in one-on-one appointments.
Well, thanks so much for coming on Rapline. I always learn so much about just general healthy eating when you come on, so I appreciate that.
Well, I love being here. I can't believe how fast it goes.
I know, it goes by so quickly, and that is a wrap for this edition of Rapline, and thanks again to Marcia Pell, registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. You can find more info about her services at marciapell.com. I'm Emily Blaze. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and reminder, if you're thinking of adding a pet to your family, consider the adoption option. You can check out one of the many local pet rescue organizations, or check out our Pet of the Week on our Facebook page. Have a great day.